I am live. Good morning. It is Wednesday, the 30th of August 2023, and I'm reading out of Eyes of HORUS. It is a book written by Joan Marshall Grants, and she was a seer, and she was able to remember her past incarnations. I am in chapter 4, I'm in chapter 3, chapter 4, part 3. This book is in several parts, and this is the third part of this book, and the chapter is HANUKS Journeys. It's chapter 4. She in this incarnation is Ra, the son of a priestess of Ra. This place in Old Egypt, 3,500 years BC. HANUKS Journeys. One day, about 2 months later, instead of resting during the noon heat, I took the smallest of Rodin's sailing boats and drifted lazily downriver. I must have fallen asleep and only woke when the boat jarred against the bank, at a point where it had been eroded by the water and overhung to form a shallow cave. I decided to stay there until the evening wind instead of rowing back. It was cooler in the shade, and I lay down in the bottom of the boat to drowse. Towards evening I heard someone singing. The tune was familiar, though I could not remember where I had heard it before. I roused myself and saw a boat, very like mine, coming upriver. There was only one man in it, but he was between me and the sun, so I could not see him clearly. A net was heaped in the stern, and when he stood up to alter the setting of the sail, I saw his loincloth was orange, the colour usually worn by fishermen. There was the hut a little further upstream, which I had noted earlier in the day. It appeared to be deserted, though the thatch was new and the door and window shutters were sound and had been recently painted. As there was no cultivated ground near it, nor did the bank shelve sufficiently for a boat to be drawn up, I wondered why it had been built there. So I was mildly curious when I saw the solitary fisherman furl his sail and row to the bank below the hut to make his boat fast to a half-submerged post, which until then I had not noticed. Again I heard the tune he was singing, and with the sound came the memory of where I had heard it before. It was HANUK's favourite tune, which Haya, the blind woman, had taught him when he was a little boy. Then I realized the fishermen shared more than a tune with HANUK. They were of the same build, and they even moved in the same way. Curiosity was strong enough to make me climb the steep bank and walk along towards the hut. As I drew level with the door, a voice said, "Well met, Ra'ab. Did father tell you I was returning today, or did chance send you to welcome me?" HANUK came out of the hut, his body glistening with the water he had been sluicing over himself. He laughed. "Why so surprised? Didn't you know this was my hut? It's a magical place. A noble son changes into a fisherman, and back again. Yet, yes, that door has seen me go through it as an old man, hair smeared with white clay and body crusted with dirt, and come out again as the HANUK you know." He must have seen how puzzled I was, though I tried to conceal it. "Did you think I went on my journey as a noble son? That would be no use, for the way to find out any abuse of authority is to pretend to be someone who looks easy prey for a bully. I was lucky on this journey, for there was no need to prove a man's heart by tempting him to flog me, but I've not always been so fortunate." He turned around to show me his back, and on the smooth brown skin I saw the raised lines of old wheels. "Come inside," he said cheerfully, "and I'll show you some of the people I've been." There were 3 large chests against one wall, and on the shelf under the window was a copper mirror, and some little unguent pots, such as women use. The only other furniture was a sleeping mat and 2 stools, and at the end of the room where stood 2 large water jars, a square of the floor was tiled, and a gutter ran through a hole in the wall to carry off the water. He opened the chests. There were cloaks and loincloths and kilts, even long robes, like those worn by foreign merchants, and there was also many headdresses and wigs, including one of oiled goat's hair, as favoured by some Asiatics. The third chest was filled with many kinds of small merchandise, such as would be carried by a peddler: baskets, ointment jars, strings of beads, copper armlets, hair ornaments, bundles of dried herbs, and a quantity of little stoppered jars decorated with magical symbols. A lot of old clothes, he said, but they hold the memory of more than 30 journeys and 4 years of my life. He picked up one of the stoppered jars. That goes with me when I become a peddler of health. I rub my hair with a mixture of oil and limestone dust and let it hang around my face in wisps. I walk with a staff bowed under my cloak, and when I come to a village I put a pebble into the heel of my sandal so that I don't forget to limp. It's a good disguise to use when there has been a lot of sickness, for sick people are eager to talk to anyone who think they may have a cure, and then they talk on of other things. They see that I'm old and poor, so why should they fear my betrayal of them to the overseer? Sometimes my pots contain unguents, so tell to the women servants of large houses. They enjoy flattery even from an old man, and it is easy to get them to speak of how that household treats them. Most of them think I'm a little mad, because I tell them I will take no payment until I pass that way again, when I shall ask for a double price as thanksgiving for their cure. I seldom return to the same place twice, for in one visit I usually find as much as a peddler can discover. In the big towns I'm often a small merchant, and the panniers of my back animals are well filled with the kinds of things you saw in the third chest. I do very little trade, for I sit in a busy corner of the marketplace with a few wares spread out in front of me and appear to drowse in the sun. I've learned a lot in marketplaces. Other merchants seldom bother to conceal their tricks from one of the same trade, and when I see the barter scales are false, or the people are being cheated, it is a sure sign that the overseer of the town is corrupt. Sometimes I go as a blind beggar, though this is not an easy role to play. The charity, or lack of it, which people show to a beggar is a good indication of the quality of their headman. If they are treated well, then they tend to behave in the same way to others. But there are a few who learn kindness through receiving cruelty. He combed back his wet hair and buckled on a pair of sandals with gold studs, such as I wore. Bolt the shutters up, for I'm ready to be Hanuk again. He closed the door, and I sealed with clay the string threaded through the latch. If you should need this hut at any time, I will give you a copy of my seal. The man who has been my body servant since I was 14 is the only other person who comes here, and he seals the door after he has been to clean it and fill the water jars. I'll leave my boat for him to collect, and we'll go home in yours. The wind by now was strong enough to take us against the current, so there was no need to row. I asked him how he had got the wheels on his back. That was nearly a year ago. We had heard that those working on the new road through the Leopard were being ill-treated, but the man from a watcher heard the news was unreliable, lazy, and a grumbler. He bore the marks of a flogging, but in view of his character he might have received them in just punishment. As I was going through the Leopard on my way further south, I decided that for a few days the merchant should disappear, and a field worker, paying tribute by labour, take his place. The royal levy is usually adequately fed, and as this road was Pharaoh's, it was not the responsibility of the nomarch. The men grumbled at their conditions, and I soon found they had good reason. They were not given the noon hour to rest, and were fed only at dawn and sunset, and then on bread, which was stale and insufficient, with no vegetables nor even garlic to eat with it. They also complained that on their rest day they had no beer or extra food. Still, their conditions were nothing like so bad as I had seen in the quarries, and for the first few days I saw no one beaten, unless they were deliberately slow or clumsy. The man working next to me had a poisoned hand, but he was afraid to report it to the overseer, although I told him it was his privilege not to work until it was healed, and that he only owed 70 days' work to Pharaoh in every year, and could pay it when he chose. He was too frightened to state his own case. I did it for him. and the overseer had me flogged for trying to stir up a rebellion by reminding the other laborers of their old rights that are still theirs by the law of Egypt. He said that now there are no laws save the will of Pharaoh. I nearly told him that when the law and Pharaoh were not of equal wisdom, Pharaoh was an impostor. It was lucky I kept my temper and took the flogging without speaking my thoughts, or I should have lost my tongue as well as few strips of skin from my back. Hanuk, when next you go, can I come with you? Have you asked Father? No, he says that when I know enough to be one of the eyes of Horus, he will tell me how I can best help the Watchers. He talks of sending me to the royal city, not in disguise, but as the son of the Oryx. Surely there is something I can do now without waiting. Every day I hear stories of how people are being maltreated outside our boundaries, and of what many of the Watchers experienced before they came here. Can I do something now instead of waiting? When are the Watchers going to rise? When the plan is complete. Perhaps this year, perhaps not for 2 or 3. The oppressors are far fewer in numbers than the oppressed. But before we can act without bringing war into Egypt, we must know the value of all who hold authority. In a small village, a headman may rule 100. How? Because they fear him, not only for himself, but for what he represents, the chain of authority stretching from him to the overseer, and so to Pharaoh, and to Set. Break that chain, and what is the power of the headman? He is no longer a man with the power of the flail, but one man against 100. The oppressors have judged their strengths by the long shadows they cast, but when the light is round, they will cast no shadow and have no power. They will be the prisoners of the prisoners they once held in bondage. And are they put to death? Only those whom the Watchers cannot cure need be sent before the 42 assessors. Already all who are known to us have had their fate decided. Even under the shadow there are some good men in authority, and they will retain it. Others will have their land taken from them and instead be given a field to plough, with perhaps a pair of oxen, so that in tilling the earth they may plant again the seed of their forgotten wisdom. A few can learn only from their own punishments, and their backs may have to feel the whips that once they held. Can I come with you, Hanuk, when next you go? You will have to ask Father. Every one of us has his own work to do, and yours may be different to mine. That's what you must always remember, Ra. So many different kinds of Watchers are needed. Every rung in the ladder of authority must be justly held. Perhaps one day all will be Watchers, and then there will be no more darkness at all. After that sunset, when earth is free of earth. After that last sunset, when earth is free of earth. So that was the last chapter, and this was the end of chapter 4, and I have a little kitten. Have a good day.